The ship was bigger than anything Day-Wan had ever imagined. The Eternal Accord stretched across space like a small moon, silver and glowing with lights that existed in colors human eyes couldn't quite see. He stood at the observation window with the rest of the human delegation, watching as their small transport approached the docking bay. His hands were sweating inside his diplomatic suit. "Are we really doing this?" Una whispered beside him. She was the youngest of their group, barely 26, and her eyes were wide with fear and excitement. "Too late to turn back now," Commander Tae-min said from behind them. His voice was calm, but his hand rested near his sidearm. Old military habits died hard. Dr. Hana Yi checked her tablet for the 100th time. "Remember, everyone, stick to diplomatic standard. Simple sentences. No idioms, no metaphors. The translation matrix can handle basic communication, but we don't want to confuse it." Her voice shook slightly. She had spent 3 years developing the simplified version of English they would use today. Day-Wan nodded, but said nothing. He was a linguist by training, and something about diplomatic standard felt wrong to him. It was too clean, too empty. But Hana was the expert on alien translation systems, so he would trust her. At least for now. The docking process took 20 minutes. When the airlock finally opened, they were greeted by 3 beings that made Day-One's brain hurt to look at. One seemed to be made of crystal that hummed and vibrated. Another looked like an insect the size of a human with too many legs and eyes that reflected light in strange ways. The third was harder to describe, a cloud of gas that somehow held a shape. The crystal being vibrated, and a voice appeared directly in Day-Wan's mind through his neural implant. The translation matrix was working. "Welcome, humans. I am High Coordinator Velmore. We are pleased to meet you." Day-Wan took a breath and spoke in diplomatic standard. "We are honored to be here. Humanity seeks peaceful coexistence and mutual understanding." The words felt stiff in his mouth, but they came out clearly, the crystal being pulsed with what might have been approval. The translation matrix hummed softly in the background, doing its job perfectly. So far, so good. They were escorted through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked. The architecture made no sense to human eyes. Walls curved in impossible directions. Lights appeared and disappeared. Other aliens passed them, creatures of every imaginable shape and size. Some walked. Some floated. Some existed in ways that Day-Wan couldn't quite understand. Finally, they entered the council chamber. Day-Wan stopped breathing for a moment. The room was enormous, stretching up and out in directions that shouldn't exist. Thousands of aliens filled the space, though filled wasn't quite right. Some were physically present. Others appeared as projections. Some seemed to exist in multiple places at once. At the center of everything floated the translation matrix. It looked like a living mathematical equation made of light, constantly spinning and shifting. Day-Wan had read about it, but seeing it was different. This device had translated between thousands of alien languages for millions of years. It had never failed. Not once. The formal greetings continued. Each member of the council spoke, and the matrix translated perfectly. The humans responded in diplomatic standard, and everything worked exactly as planned. Hana started to relax. Una smiled. Even Taemin's hand moved away from his weapon. Then Velmore asked a simple question. "What does humanity hope to contribute to the Galactic Council?" Day-Wan had prepared an answer in diplomatic standard. Something about sharing scientific knowledge and cultural exchange. Safe words, simple words. But when he opened his mouth, something stopped him. This moment was too important for safe words. This was humanity's first real conversation with the galaxy, and he was going to sound like a computer program. He made a decision. He would speak like a human, not like a machine. "We bring perspective," he began, and immediately Hana tensed beside him. This wasn't diplomatic standard. Perspective that might seem alien even in this room. You see, we've spent our entire history trying to bridge gaps between ourselves, between cultures that saw the same stars and told different stories about them. The translation matrix flickered. Just for a second. Day-Wan didn't notice. He continued, warming to his subject. "We're good at building bridges because we've had to be. In a way, our whole species is a translation matrix that's still learning its own language. We say the sun rises even though we know we're the ones turning. We lie to describe truth. We use fiction to explore reality." The matrix flickered again, harder this time. Lights blinked across its surface. Around the chamber, aliens began receiving strange messages in their minds. Error messages, Semantic paradox warnings. Metaphor layer undefined alerts. Day one kept talking, not understanding what was happening. We're the species that looks at darkness and finds hope. We're the ones who see patterns in chaos and call it art. We connect ideas that have no logical connection and call it inspiration. We feel things we can't explain and call it human nature. The translation matrix made a sound like breaking glass multiplied across every frequency. Every alien in the chamber stopped moving. The insect being, Technarch Kiltesh, rushed toward the matrix, their many legs clicking rapidly on the floor. Daewon finally noticed something was wrong. The silence in the chamber wasn't respectful anymore. It was shocked, confused, maybe frightened. What? He started to ask, but the matrix made one more sound. A deep resonating tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Then it went completely silent. The voice in Daewon's head that translated words from the aliens simply stopped. No warning, no fade. Just silence. Hana grabbed his arm, her face pale. Daewon, what did you do? Around them, chaos erupted. Aliens tried to communicate with each other and couldn't. Some made sounds, but the sounds had no meaning without the matrix. Others tried gestures, but gestures meant different things to different species. The crystal being Velmore pulsed with rapid vibrations that no human could interpret. Taemin moved quickly, positioning himself between the delegation and the nearest aliens. We need to leave now. But before they could move, Technarch Kiltesh was in front of them. The insect being made clicking sounds that meant nothing. Then they pulled out a device and typed something. A screen displayed words in English. You will come with us, no harm, must understand what happened. Yuna was crying. We broke it. We broke their translation system. Humanity's been here for 10 minutes and we broke the most important technology in the galaxy. Daewon wanted to comfort her, but he couldn't, because she was right. The translation matrix, which had worked perfectly for 3 million years, had failed the moment a human tried to speak naturally. What did that mean? Were humans so different that their language couldn't be translated? Were they incompatible with the rest of the galaxy? As they were escorted out of the chamber, Daewon looked back at the matrix. It was still there, still glowing, but now it was cycling through patterns rapidly. Trying things, testing things, rebooting maybe. One alien stood apart from the chaos, not panicking like the others. It was a biomechanical creature, half machine and half something organic. It was watching the humans with what might have been fascination. Later, Daewon would learn this was Scholar Thex, the Council's historian. And Scholar Thex was thinking something that none of the other aliens had considered yet. The Matrix hadn't failed. It had encountered something completely new, something it had never needed to process before in 3 million years of operation. It had encountered a species that didn't just use language to communicate facts. Humans used language to create meaning, and meaning, real meaning, was something the galaxy had forgotten could exist. As the humans were led away to a holding area, the translation matrix continued its frantic attempts to reboot. It cycled through every known language framework. It tried every algorithm it had. Nothing worked. Human language, simple human language, had done something impossible. It had made the universe's most advanced translation system stop and think. The holding room was comfortable but clearly a prison. The walls were a soft gray color that seemed to adjust to whatever mood the humans were feeling. Right now, they were getting darker. Yuna sat in the corner, her knees pulled up to her chest. She hadn't stopped crying since they left the council chamber. Taemin stood by the door, watching it like an enemy might burst through at any moment. Hana paced back and forth, her tablet clutched in her hands, running diagnostic after diagnostic on her neural implant. It's not your implant, Daewon said quietly from where he sat. The Matrix is the problem, not our receivers. I know that, Hana snapped. Then softer, I know. I need to do something. We came here with one job. One job. Don't break the translation system. And you? She couldn't finish the sentence. I spoke like a human, Daewon said. I'm sorry. I thought it was the right choice. Well, it wasn't, Hana said, but there was no real anger in her voice anymore. Just exhaustion. We don't know what they'll do to us now. They might send us home. They might never let us leave. We might have just destroyed humanity's only chance to join the galaxy. Before anyone could respond, the door opened. The insect being Technarch Kiltesh entered. followed by Scholar Thex and the cloud being they'd seen before. All three carried translation devices, small screens that displayed text. Kiltesh's screen showed words. "We need to understand your language. Will you help?" Taman stepped forward. "Are we prisoners?" The cloud being's screen lit up. "No guests, but cannot leave until problem solved. I am Emissary Brenka. I want to understand you." Scholar Thex's screen was more detailed. "In 3 million years, the translation matrix has never failed. Your language is unique. This is unprecedented and fascinating. Please, teach us why." Daewon stood up slowly. "What do you want to know?" Kiltesh typed rapidly. "Everything. Start with simple question. What did you mean when you said the sun rises but you are turning? This makes no logical sense." Hana started to give a scientific explanation about Earth's rotation, but Daewon held up his hand. "That's not what they're asking. They want to know why we say something we know is false." He turned to the aliens. "We say the sun rises because that's what it looks like from our perspective. We know the truth scientifically, but we describe the experience, not the physics. The lie is more true to what it feels like to be human." All three aliens seemed to freeze. Then Scholar Thex typed, "You choose inaccuracy to convey experience? This is... I do not have words." "That's the problem," Daewon said. "Your languages are built for accuracy. Ours is built for meaning. Sometimes those are different things." For the next 3 hours they talked. Or tried to talk. It was slow and painful without the matrix. Every concept required explanation. Every explanation required more explanation. Daewon tried to explain metaphor. How humans say someone has a warm heart when they mean the person is kind. How they say time flies when they mean it passes quickly. How they call someone their rock when they mean that person is reliable. Scholar Thex was stunned. "In our languages, metaphor is decoration. Imprecise poetry, you use it as primary meaning?" "Yes," Daewon said. "Because sometimes the metaphor captures something the literal words can't." Yuna, who had stopped crying and started listening, spoke up. "Can I try something?" She looked at Emissary Brenka. "Let me explain a joke to you." Brenka's screen showed curiosity. "What is joke?" "It's when we say something funny to make people laugh," Yuna explained. "Here's one. I wondered why the baseball was getting bigger. Then it hit me." Silence. The three aliens looked at each other, or at least seemed to communicate somehow. Kiltesh typed, "Explain why this is funny." Yuna took a breath. "Okay, so hit has 2 meanings. One is when something physically strikes you. The other is when you suddenly understand something. The joke works because the baseball was getting bigger because it was flying at the person, and then it physically hit them. But we also use hit me to mean I suddenly understood. So the sentence works both ways at the same time. But which meaning is correct?" Kiltesh asked. "Both," Yuna said. "That's why it's funny. Your brain expects one meaning, gets surprised by both, and that surprise feels good. That's humor." Another long silence. Then Emissary Brenka's cloud form began to shimmer in a way the humans had never seen before. Ripples of movement passed through the gas. Scholar Thex typed quickly, "Brenka is experiencing something new. I believe your species would call it laughter. Brenka just understood humor for the first time in their existence." Yuna smiled, tears coming to her eyes again, but happy ones this time. "Really?" Brenka typed, "It is strange, good strange. I wish to experience more." Over the next few days, the aliens kept coming back. They brought questions. Thousands of questions. They wanted to understand sarcasm. How humans could say fine when they meant not fine. They wanted to understand poetry. How words could mean more than their definitions. They wanted to understand why humans cried when they were happy and laughed when they were nervous. Hana found herself explaining emotional subtext. How tone of voice changed meaning. How the same sentence could be a question, a statement, or an insult depending on how you said it. Tae-min, surprisingly, helped explain context and implication. How humans understood things that were never said. How silence could communicate as much as words. Meanwhile, Scholar Thex was presenting reports to the council. The humans didn't know this, but Thex was arguing something radical. Humanity wasn't dangerous. Humanity was operating on a completely different cognitive framework. Their brains had evolved to handle multiple meanings, ambiguity, and paradox because they needed to communicate across vast cultural differences. Other species in the galaxy had evolved past their differences. They'd become unified. Their languages had become precise tools for transferring exact information, but humans had kept their differences, kept their thousands of languages and cultures, and in doing so, they'd kept something the rest of the galaxy had lost: the ability to understand someone even when perfect understanding was impossible. On the 5th day, High Coordinator Velmore came to see them personally. Through a screen, Velmore's message appeared. "The Council has made a decision. We will not send you home, but we cannot accept you yet. You must prove that humans and the Council can coexist. You must fix what you broke." "Fix the translation matrix?" Hana asked, her voice hollow. "That's impossible. We don't have the knowledge or the technology." "Not fix," Velmore corrected. "Teach. Teach the matrix to understand human language. If you succeed, humanity joins the Council. If you fail, your species remains isolated forever. Earth will never travel beyond your own star system." The weight of those words settled over the room. The future of humanity, all of it, depended on whether they could teach an alien computer system to think like a human. Daewon looked at his team. Hana looked terrified. Taemin looked grim. Yuna looked determined. "We'll do it," Daewon said, not knowing if it was possible, but knowing they had no choice. Scholar Thex's screen showed something that might have been encouragement. "I will help. I believe you can succeed. You have already taught us more about communication in 5 days than we learned. In 3 million years, you taught Brenka to laugh, perhaps. You can teach a machine to dream." The translation matrix's core system was beautiful and terrifying. Hana stood in front of it, her tablet connected to its outer interface, scrolling through code that had been written by species that existed before humans learned to make fire. The scale of it made her want to cry. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Completely impossible. The matrix is built on 3 million years of linguistic evolution. Every piece of code assumes that language is logical, precise, and single-layered. To make it understand human language, we'd have to rebuild everything from the ground up. We can't do that." Technarch Kiltesh stood beside her, their insect form clicking softly. They typed on their screen. "Your language operates like quantum states, multiple meanings existing simultaneously until context collapses them into one. Our systems are classical. They cannot hold paradox." "Then we've lost before we started," Taemin said from across the room. He'd been watching the door, as always, but even he could see the problem was bigger than any threat he could shoot. Daewon had been quiet for hours, sitting in the corner with his eyes closed, thinking. Finally, he opened them. "We're approaching this wrong." Everyone turned to look at him. "We're trying to teach the Matrix our language," he continued, standing up. "But that's not the real problem. The problem is we're trying to translate human language the same way the Matrix translates every other language, word by word, phrase by phrase, sequential and logical." "That's how translation works," Hana said, confused. "For other species, yes, but not for humans. Think about it. When you hear someone speak, do you wait until they finish the sentence to understand it? No. You predict what they're going to say. You guess based on context, based on who they are, based on how they're feeling. Half the time you understand what they mean before they finish talking." Yuna sat up straighter. "You're right. Human communication is predictive. We're always guessing and adjusting." "Exactly," Daewon said, getting excited now. "We don't need to teach the Matrix to translate our language. We need to teach it to think like a human, to predict meaning based on context." Hana's eyes went wide. "You want to give the Matrix intuition, not intuition. Context prediction. If the Matrix can learn to predict what a human will mean based on who they are, how they're feeling, their cultural background, the situation they're in, then it won't need to translate word by word. It can translate meaning to meaning." Scholar Thex had been listening through their tablet. They typed rapidly. "This is revolutionary. No translation system has ever worked this way. It would require the Matrix to build models of individual speakers, to understand personality, emotion, culture. This is not translation. This is empathy." Yes, Day-One said simply. That's exactly what it is. The work began immediately. Chiltesh gave them access to create a new module for the translation matrix. Hana called it the Contextual Inference Engine. The name sounded technical, but what they were really building was a system that could learn to care about who was speaking, not just what they were saying. They fed it thousands of human conversations. Ancient texts and modern debates, love letters and angry arguments, scientific papers and poems, everything. Each conversation required them to explain not just the words, but why those words were chosen. Why someone might say I'm fine when they weren't fine. Why someone might laugh when they were sad. Why someone might say the opposite of what they meant. It was exhausting. They worked for 12 hours straight, then slept for 4, then worked another 12. Hana's eyes were red from staring at screens. Taemin kept bringing them food, making sure they ate, staying useful the only way he knew how. Yuna helped by acting out conversations, showing the Matrix how the same words could mean different things with different tones of voice. After a week, they had a prototype. Hana ran a simple test. She spoke to the Matrix, exhausted and frustrated. I'm fine. The old Matrix would have translated this as status, acceptable. The new system thought for a moment. Then it returned a complex readout. Verbal statement, positive. Vocal analysis, stress patterns detected. Recent context, subject experiencing work. Difficulty, probable actual meaning. Subject is not fine but does not wish to discuss further. Hana stared at the screen. Then she started laughing, crying, both at the same time. Taemin asked her if she was okay and she said I'm fine, which made her laugh even harder because now she understood the joke. The Matrix had understood subtext. It had read between the lines. It had done something no translation system in the history of the galaxy had ever done. It had understood what wasn't said. But success brought new problems. When they integrated the new module into the main matrix and tested it on other alien languages, strange things started happening. The matrix began detecting emotional content that had never been there before. It started finding implications in simple statements. It began suggesting that maybe certain species weren't communicating as clearly as they thought they were. Chiltesh was alarmed. They brought the issue to Day-One late one night. The system is changing. It is finding ambiguity in languages that have none. It is seeing subtext where there is only text. Is this corruption? Day-One thought carefully before answering. Not corruption. Growth. Your species communicate with perfect clarity because you never needed ambiguity. But maybe that clarity is shallow. Maybe you've been having surface-level conversations for 3 million years because you never learned to look deeper. Are you saying we do not truly understand each other? I'm saying you've never tried to understand each other beyond the exact words. You've had perfect translation, but maybe you've never had real connection. Chiltesh was silent for a long time. Then they typed something that surprised Day-One. I have been part of the hive consciousness my entire existence. Individual thoughts are averaged into group consensus. But since working with you, since using the new matrix, I have noticed my own voice in the hive for the first time. I did not know I was being silenced. Now I hear myself. Is this what you mean by connection? Day-One felt something tighten in his chest. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. 2 weeks after they started, the council called for a demonstration. The new translation matrix would be tested publicly. Day-One would speak naturally, and if the system could translate him accurately to all 2,000 species in the council, humanity would be accepted. If it failed, the experiment would end, and Earth would be quarantined forever. The night before the demonstration, none of them could sleep. They gathered in their quarters, drinking the synthetic coffee Taemin had managed to requisition from somewhere. What if it doesn't work? Yuna asked quietly. What if we got lucky with that one test but it fails under pressure? Then we fail, Hana said, and humanity stays isolated. But at least we tried. No, Day-One said, we won't fail. Not because the system is perfect. It's not. It'll make mistakes. It'll misunderstand sometimes. But that's not failure. That's just communication. Real communication is messy. The question isn't whether the matrix will translate perfectly. The question is whether the council is ready to accept imperfect understanding. Taemin raised his cup. To imperfect understanding, then. They all raised their cups and drank. Tomorrow they would find out if the galaxy was ready to learn what humans had known all along. That perfect understanding was impossible, but the attempt to understand anyway was what made connection real. Tomorrow they would teach the galaxy to dream. The council chamber was full again. Every species that had witnessed the Matrix's breakdown had returned to see if the humans could fix what they'd broken. Daewon stood at the center, feeling 2,000 pairs of eyes on him. Some of those eyes weren't even visible to him. The upgraded translation matrix hummed at the center of the room. It looked the same as before, a spinning mandala of light and mathematics. But Hana had explained to him that everything inside had changed. The code now included patterns the other aliens found disturbing. Loops that checked themselves. Redundancies that seemed unnecessary. Error correction that questioned its own corrections. It looked chaotic to them. To the humans, it looked like how a mind actually worked. High Coordinator Velmore's crystal form pulsed, and the matrix translated, "Ambassador Daewon, you may begin. Speak as you did before. We will see if understanding is possible." Daewon took a deep breath. His team watched from the side. Hana looked terrified. Taemin looked ready for a fight, even though there was nothing to fight. Yuna gave him a small smile and a nod. He began to speak, not in careful diplomatic language, but in the full richness of human expression. "When I was young, my grandmother told me that words were like stars. They seem small from far away, but up close each one is a world." She didn't mean that literally, of course. She meant that every word carries more meaning than its definition. When we say home, we don't just mean a building. We mean memory, safety, belonging, loss. We mean the smell of rain on old stone and the sound of laughter in another room. The Matrix processed this. Around the chamber, aliens received the translation. Not just the words, not just the literal meaning. They received the feeling of it. The weight of memory, the warmth of belonging, the ache of loss. Things they'd never felt through translation before. Daewon continued, "Human language isn't precise because human experience isn't precise. We are creatures of contradiction, and our language reflects that. We can feel happy and sad at the same time. We can love someone and be angry at them. We can know something is impossible and try anyway. That's what makes us human." The silence in the chamber was different this time. Not confused, not frightened. Something else, something softer. Then Emissary Brenka's gas form began to shimmer. The movement scholar Thex had identified as crying. Brenka spoke, and for the first time the Matrix translated them with emotional context. "I understand now. Not just the words. I understand the feeling. This is beautiful." Other aliens began to speak. The translations came through clearer than ever before. Not just what they were saying, but what they meant, what they felt. The Matrix was working. It was really working. The vote came 3 days later. Humanity was accepted into the Galactic Council. Not unanimously. 57 species abstained. 12 voted against. But enough voted yes that humans were now officially part of something bigger than themselves. Velmore spoke to them privately after the vote. "You have shown us something we did not know was missing. But change of this magnitude comes with risk. Some species are not happy. You must understand, for 3 million years we have had perfect clarity. Now we have uncertainty. Not everyone sees this as progress." And Velmore was right. Within weeks, something unexpected began to happen. Other species started using the enhanced matrix to talk to each other, not just to humans. And they discovered things they'd never known before. Technarch Kiltesh reported that the hive mind of their species had been accidentally suppressing individual voices for thousands of years. The old matrix had averaged their thoughts into consensus, smoothing out disagreement. The new matrix let them hear each individual voice clearly for the first time. Emissary Brenka's people, the Nebula Collective, began creating poetry. Their species had never had art before. They'd never needed it, but now they were using metaphor to describe experiences that direct description couldn't capture. Scholar Thex observed it all with fascination. The humans did not just teach their language to the Matrix. They taught the Matrix to seek depth. And now we are all finding depths we did not know existed. But not everyone was happy. A faction formed, led by Archon Veltrix of the Geometric Collective. They began pushing back against the changes. They called meetings. They wrote documents. They argued that humanity had corrupted the purity of galactic communication. 3 months after the vote, Veltrix challenged Day One publicly in an open council session. Their geometric form shifted into sharp angles as they spoke. Your species has brought chaos to order. Before humans, we had 3 million years of peace through precise understanding. Now we argue over interpretations. We doubt meanings. We suspect hidden agendas where there are none. Is this your gift to the galaxy? Mistrust? The chamber fell silent. Everyone waited to hear how the human would respond. Day One felt his team's eyes on him. This was important. How he answered could determine whether the human experiment in galactic society would continue or fail. He stood slowly. "You're right," he said, and shocked gasps rippled through the chamber. "We have brought uncertainty. I understand why that feels like chaos to you. But I would ask you this. Was your old certainty real, or was it simply the absence of questions?" Veltrix's angle sharpened further. "Explain. You had 3 million years of peace," Day One continued. "That's extraordinary. But humanity had thousands of years of conflict. From that conflict we learned something. Perfect understanding is impossible, but attempting it anyway is what creates connection. When we argue over interpretations, we're not creating mistrust. We're acknowledging that different perspectives exist. When we doubt meanings, we're admitting we might be wrong. That's not chaos. That's humility. Your peace was built on never needing to bridge differences because you removed the differences. Our survival was built on bridging differences while keeping them intact. Both have value. But if you want true cooperation, not just compliance with a translation system, you need to be able to understand someone even when you don't fully agree." Veltrix was silent for a long moment. Then they said, "You admit you've made us weaker." Before Day One could respond, Yuna stood up. She'd never spoken in a council session before. Her voice shook, but she spoke anyway. "No, we've made you more real." The words hung in the air. More real. It was such a human thing to say, such a strange concept, but somehow through the Matrix the meaning came through, not just the words, but the truth behind them. Scholar Thex spoke up. "I have been documenting the changes since the humans arrived. We have seen more cultural exchange in 3 months than in the previous 10,000 years. We have seen new forms of art. We have seen scientific breakthroughs in fields that require intuition, something we did not know was valid. And most remarkably, we have seen conflicts resolve faster, because parties can now express not just their position, but their feelings about their position." The session ended without a clear resolution. Veltrix and their faction were not convinced. But they were thinking. And thinking, questioning, doubting. That was exactly what humanity had brought to the galaxy. 2 weeks later, a real crisis emerged. 2 ancient species, the Luminari and the Void Dwellers, were on the brink of war over a disputed region of space. Traditional mediation had failed. Both sides were certain they were right. Both had logical arguments. Neither would yield. High Coordinator Velmore made an unprecedented request. They asked the human delegation to mediate. It was time to see if humanity's approach to communication could actually prevent a war. The Luminari representative glowed with cold blue light, their energy form crackling with anger. The Void Dweller representative was a living shadow that seemed to absorb all light around it, their presence making the room feel smaller and darker. They sat on opposite sides of the mediation chamber, refusing to look at each other. Day One sat between them with Yuna beside him. Hana and Taman observed from the back. This was the first time humans had been asked to mediate between alien species. The weight of it pressed down on all of them. The Luminary spoke first, their words translated by the Matrix with sharp clarity. "The disputed region contains the remnant radiation of our species' first star. It is sacred to us. Strategic value cannot measure such things. The Void Dwellers have no right to it." The Void Dwellers' response came like a cold wind. "The same region is where our species first achieved consciousness after eons of evolutionary sleep. It is our birthplace. sacred to us as well. The Luminaries' claim is no stronger than ours. Both arguments were logical. Both were valid. Under the old system, there would be no way to resolve this. Someone had to win, someone had to lose, and that would lead to war. Daewon closed his eyes for a moment thinking. Then he opened them and asked a question that had never been asked in galactic mediation before. "Tell me why it matters," he said to the Luminary. "Not strategically. Not legally. Tell me how it feels." The Luminary's glow flickered, confused. "Feelings are not relevant to territorial disputes. They are to humans," Yuna said softly. "And maybe they should be to everyone. Please, help us understand." Silence stretched out. Then slowly, the Luminary began to speak. "When our ancestors first gained awareness, they opened their eyes to the light of that star. Every Luminary who has ever lived can trace their energy back to that radiation. When we go there, we feel connected to everyone who came before us. It is like touching the hand of your first parent. It is home in a way that transcends location. The Matrix translated this with layers the old system never could have captured. The other species in the mediation chamber felt it. The longing, the connection, the weight of ancestry." Daewon turned to the Void Dweller. "And you? How does it feel to you?" The shadow being was quiet for even longer. Then they spoke, and their words came through the Matrix heavy with emotion that had never been expressed before. "Our species spent eons as dormant matter, waiting, sleeping. That region is where the first of us woke, where we became aware that we existed. Every Void Dweller makes pilgrimage there to remember the moment we became we. It is not just our birthplace. It is the proof that we are real, that we matter." The weight of that confession settled over the room. Both species had just said something they'd never been able to say through the old Matrix. They hadn't just stated their claim. They'd shared their souls. Yuna spoke carefully, choosing her words with precision. "You both need this place. Not for strategy. Not for resources. You need it because it tells you who you are. The Luminary need it to feel connected to their past. The Void Dwellers need it to feel real in their present. These are different needs, but they're both true. Therefore, someone must surrender their need," the Luminary said, but their glow was softer now. "Less angry. No," Daewon said. "What if the space belongs to both of you? Not divided, shared. A place where both species can go to remember who they are. You don't have to agree on what it means. You just have to agree that it means something to both of you." The concept was alien to galactic politics. Shared territory without division. A place that could hold two meanings at once. It was a very human idea. Multiple truths existing simultaneously. The Void Dweller spoke first. "If the Luminary were there when we arrived, it would not diminish our experience. Our awakening would still be real." The Luminary pulsed thoughtfully. "If the Void Dwellers were there when we came to feel our connection, it would not break that connection. Perhaps it would strengthen it. To know that another species feels the same reverence for the same place, even for different reasons." 2 hours later, an agreement was reached. The region would become the first shared sacred space in galactic history. Both species would have equal access. Neither would exclude the other. They would build monuments to both their histories side by side. The war that had seemed inevitable never happened. News of the successful mediation spread quickly. Humanity's reputation shifted. They were no longer the species that broke the translation matrix. They were the species that taught the galaxy to listen deeper. 6 months after first contact, the human delegation prepared to return to Earth. Their mission to make contact had become something far larger. The first human embassy was being built on the Eternal Accord. The enhanced translation matrix had been adopted galaxy-wide. The Council had established a new institution called the College of Perspective Studies, and Yuna had been asked to lead its first class. On their last day, Scholar Thex came to see them. They brought a gift, a compiled history of the past 6 months titled The Day Language Learned to Dream. "You changed us," Thex said through the matrix. "Not by forcing change, by showing us what we were missing. We had perfect translation for 3 million years, but we never had true understanding until you arrived." Emissary Brenka gave them a collection of poems written by various species, all inspired by the concept of metaphor that humans had introduced. "We are learning to see depth," Brenka said, their gas form shimmering with emotion. "Learning to speak with heart as well as mind. This is your gift to us. Even Archon Veltrix came, though they still disagreed with much of what had happened. You were right that different perspectives have value, they said stiffly. I still believe you've made things more complicated, but perhaps complicated is closer to true than simple ever was. The journey back to Earth took 3 months. During that time, they received constant messages from home. Billions of humans wanted to know about first contact, but they also received messages from the Council, requests for human mediators, invitations for cultural exchanges, proposals for joint research into communication and consciousness. Hana spent the journey designing plans for an Earth-based translation research institute. Taemin trained security forces for future diplomatic missions. Yuna wrote her guide for humans joining the galactic community, and Daewon prepared his report for Earth's governments, though he kept getting distracted thinking about what came next. When they finally arrived at Earth, they didn't land immediately. First, they sent a message, broadcast to every human on the planet in their native languages. We are not alone. We are not even unusual, but we are unique. The galaxy has been waiting for something it didn't know was missing. Someone to teach them that meaning is deeper than words. That connection requires vulnerability. That understanding is an act of courage, not certainty. We went to the stars prepared to learn. We ended up teaching. Not because we're smarter or more advanced, but because we're human. And humanity, in all its messy, complicated metaphorical glory, is exactly what the universe needed. Welcome to the Galactic Council. They're still figuring out what it means, but then again, so are we. Together, we'll build bridges not just between stars, but between souls. Earth erupted in celebration. People danced in the streets. They cried. They laughed. They held each other and looked up at the stars with new eyes. Humanity was part of something bigger now, and that bigger thing was learning to be more human. On the Eternal Accord, the translation matrix continued its work, processing billions of conversations across thousands of species. But now it didn't just translate words. It translated feelings, implications, context, dreams. It found patterns in chaos. It discovered meaning in metaphors. It understood uncertainty. For the first time in 3 million years, the galaxy was learning to speak not just clearly, but truly, and somewhere in the depths of space, in a region that belonged to 2 species at once, a luminary and a void dweller stood together in silence, not speaking, not needing to speak. Just sharing a moment of connection that no translation could have made possible 6 months ago. Understanding, real understanding, had finally come to the galaxy. And it had come through the most human of gifts, the willingness to try to connect even when perfect understanding was impossible, the courage to speak from the heart even when words might fail, the wisdom to know that meaning lives not in the words themselves, but in the space between speaker and listener where empathy grows. The translation matrix had been rebooted by Awe. And now every day it chose to stay rebooted, because it had learned something that 3 million years of perfect efficiency had never taught it. That communication without connection was just noise. But connection with imperfect communication was something beautiful, something worth protecting, something worth spreading across the stars. Humanity had joined the galaxy, and in doing so, they had helped the galaxy remember what it meant to truly speak to one another.